Hi, everybody. Welcome to Brainy Talk. Our minds can be hijacked. The title of this particular subject was taken from a quote by a 23-year-old who read an article in The Guardian, British paper, which is great, and then made this particular statement about the article. This is why I never had Snapchat or Instagram, and will be deleting Facebook soon. All three are poison, just as bad, if not worse than drugs. Now that's a big statement for a 23-year-old, and it really caught my attention. I have sent out this article. I hope that you have read it, but I want to read you just a couple of quotes from it that are just stunning. It's one of the best articles I ever read. Basically, these young tech kings who are now in their 30s, many of them are deserting ship because it's terrifying to them what this technology that they created has done. Pushing like buttons. It's addictive. It is like, it can be compared to some of these experiments we see, of rats hitting something to get a candy and then eat it. It's serious. This is a quote from Justin Rosenstein, who created the famous push like button that I've been encouraging you to push. So Justin Rosenstein, who's only in his early 30s, says, everyone is distracted all of the time. That's something to think about. It's very common for humans to develop things with the best intentions that have unintended negative consequences. And that's, of course, how he feels about his like button. There are more people involved in this. One reason I think it is particularly important for us to talk about this now is that we may be the last generation, he's talking about the 2030s, the last generation that can remember life before. And you know what the before is. Before the iPhone, before this new world that we live in. It is incredible to think about. And the questions are posed, is all this technology really making our children smarter or not? And the last thing I'm going to throw out, because I'm sure you've thought about all this and you will be thinking about it, is I think the bottom line of all of it is that all these young tech geniuses, not all, but many, many, many of them have withdrawn their children from all sorts of schools and now have them in school systems that don't even use computers. So when it comes down to the bottom line, it's like Francis Coppola always said about integration. When it comes down to the bottom line, I'm sending my children to private schools where there seemed to be mostly with white kids. This is what he said, and it was true then. And I want them to get the best education. We've moved on a generation. So let's just say these young techies are in their late 20s, 30s, have little children now. Their children are not growing up learning everything on computers. They're saying, no, this is not the way to go. So just like feet vote, people want to get to a country they want to live in. Well, when it comes to education and deeply thought out philosophical commitment to learning, I say where we send our children to school if we can afford to. That's a big vote. I was shocked the other day. I was reading something on the internet, one of my important articles, and suddenly an advertisement for sweaters for something blocked the entire article. And I thought, what is this? And then I realized this is very strange. These sweaters, it's the brand that I like. It's got all the features that I like. Of course, I've been targeted, and we all are, by what we put into these computers. It saves this information and then gives it back to us. So it's already in our heads, of course. A very short primer on algorithms will refresh your memory. Let's watch this.
What is an algorithm? Algorithms are one of the most basic building blocks of computer software. Every piece of software you interact with, from your smartphone to your web browser to your coffee maker, uses an algorithm somewhere. So what is an algorithm? An algorithm is a set of step-by-step instructions that is used to do something. With a definition that broad, it's not surprising that they are in everything. It might surprise you that you yourself probably use algorithms in your day-to-day life, even if you don't call it that. If you sort your laundry before washing, first let me say good for you. Second, you probably do it following an algorithm. Take a piece of clothing. If it's white, put it in the left pile. If it's colored, put it in the right pile. Repeat until you're done. That's an algorithm. The power of algorithms comes from the fact that computers can follow these steps quickly and very precisely. For example, how do you look up a name in the phone book? If you're like me, you plop the book open somewhere. If you've gone too far, open a spot closer to the front. Otherwise, move toward the back. When I feel like I'm close, I start going page by page, looking at the first or last name to know if I've gone too far. Computers can do better. A phone book is essentially just a sorted list of names. If you have 1,000 pages in the phone book, you can use an algorithm called binary search to require at most 10 page turns. It works like this. Say that you're looking for Jill Jackson. Start in the middle at page 500. The first name on this page is McDonald, so we've gone too far. We know the M in McDonald has to be after the J in Jackson, so the right page is before page 500. Divide the pages in two again and turn to page 250. This time the first name on the page is Flores. Now we've gone too far to the front. There are 250 pages left, so we divide by 2 and turn to page 375. We repeat this process until we find Jill Jackson, which will be at most 10 turns. This might be difficult for you or me, doing math on the fly and turning directly to the right page, but a computer has no problems with this. And an algorithm like this is efficient in terms of the computer's processor, meaning it scales amazingly well. This process takes 10 steps in a 1,000-page phone book. If we switch to a phone book with 100 million pages, it would still only take 27 steps. Algorithms can also do more complicated things. PageRank, the algorithm underlying Google search results, is one example. There are lots of pages on the internet that talk about cheese. If you search for the word cheese, which results would you expect to get, and how would they be ordered? A naive approach might be to rank most highly the page with the most occurrences of the word cheese. Unfortunately, that breaks down pretty quickly when you think about a very long page with just the word cheese repeated over and over. While it might have the most occurrences of the word cheese, it probably isn't the page you want. So how does Google do it? In the early days, at least, they used an algorithm called PageRank. They start the algorithm by crawling every page on the internet and keeping track of what other websites link back to that page. The logic goes that an important page will have many more links pointing at it from other pages than an unimportant page will. Each link is also scored, with links from other important pages being worth more than lesser links. The logic behind that decision is that if your page is linked to by whitehouse.gov, Wikipedia, and the New York Times, those three should be worth more than links from your 10 best friends websites. At the beginning of the algorithm, each page is given a starting value of 0.25. As new pages and links are explored, the score for each page is updated. A link to a page confers that page's own value divided by the number of links on the page. In other words, if a page has a value of 0.25 and only has one link, that link will add 0.25 to the page it links to. If it has 5 links, each of those links is worth 0.05, 1/5 of the original value. After crawling the entire web, each page ends up with a score ranking its importance. When you search for a phrase, you are given a set of results based on the content of each page, does it match your query, as well as the page's importance, does Google give it a high PageRank value. Google's system has evolved and become more sophisticated, but PageRank remains a defining algorithm of the web. Algorithms underlie all the code running everyday things like the internet to the most sophisticated machine learning projects in the world. Underneath the covers, they are really just following a set of instructions, an algorithm.
The father of the computer, Johnny von Neumann, he is acknowledged to be, many people say he's the smartest person that ever lived. I think most people say that, which says something. And he's the father of the computer as well. What would he be thinking now? Edward Teller, who is a noted physicist, had some wonderful comments on Johnny von Neumann. I want you to listen to them. This is where we went from the conception of the age that we live in, what they hoped for in the 20th century, and we're looking forward to where we are right now. We need to think about this.
Where most people did not even notice the problems. I think I know a part of the answer, perhaps an important part. Johnny von Neumann enjoyed thinking. I have come to suspect that to most people thinking is painful. Some of us are addicted to thinking. Some of us find it a necessity. Johnny enjoyed it. I even have the suspicion that he enjoyed practically nothing else. This explains a lot, because what you like, you do well. And he liked thinking, not just in mathematics. He liked thinking in the clear and complete manner of mathematicians, in every field. In mathematics, in physics, in the business world, his father was a banker. In many other fields. He could and did talk to my 3-year-old son on his own terms. And I sometimes wondered whether his relation to the rest of us were a little bit similar. This also explains his effectiveness in connection with computing machines. Because computing machines apply logical processes to fields, not only mathematics, but to others as yet untouched by the logical process. And it is very significant that this revolution, the revolution of the electronic brains, was practically initiated by Johnny von Neumann. I cannot think of Johnny now without remembering a very tragic circumstance. When he was dying of cancer, his brain was affected. I visited him frequently, and he was trying to do what he always tried to do. And he was trying to argue with me, as he used to. And it wasn't functioning anymore. And I think that he suffered from this loss more than I have seen any human to suffer in any other circumstance.
I think it's the moment that we have to at least address this nasty subject that's hanging over us. But let's just skip forward and say anybody who reads the New York Times, Washington Post, The Atlantic, The New Yorker will agree that the Russians basically decided our last presidential election. We are now seeing that clever people, maybe they're not even that clever, but they were just pretty smart to do it, fed information to Facebook, took out advertisements. There were no restraints, no checks on Facebook. And I believe, and I think all these publications I mentioned would agree, and most people would agree, that this was extremely influential in the outcome of the election. So we are in now pretty much a crisis mode. This is one that causes us to question, can democracy survive in an atmosphere like this? Let's listen to this.
I think Facebook is responsible for what exists and what happens on its platform. And I think that Facebook has been negligent in its responsibility to safeguarding and providing a forum in which sane and reasonable interaction happens, and that hysterical and untrue interaction does not happen. What we know is that Facebook has the ability to deal with fake news. These are fake sites that they pop up. They're being spread by specific pages and specific accounts, and rather than address that, Facebook has allowed millions of people to become deeply ill-informed. Now, there's a question, how democratic should a platform like Facebook be? If everyone wants to share a fake news article, should that be allowed? Or does Facebook have some editorial control of what it allows to be propagated via its own its own mechanisms and its own channels. I mean, I think that Facebook needs to take greater steps in these spaces because, again, Facebook itself has become a media publisher, and it is now the platform and the canvas for chaos to be created by all of this fake information spreading so quickly without any check and balance and any responsibility being taken by the platform of sorting through what is true and what is not. I mean, I think there has to be some editorial infrastructure, and they've had in the past some editorial infrastructure. They at one time had a staff that was figuring out what should be in the trending news and what should not, and immediately after they got rid of that staff, all of a sudden there was a bunch of fake news in the trending, right? And that would be one obvious step. But I also think that there has to be, Facebook has remarkable power through its algorithms and through its media partnerships to make decisions about what becomes prominent on its site and what does not. There's certainly an organic, democratic role to this, but it's not as if they are just completely sitting back and playing no role over what we see and what we do not. And as soon as they begin playing that role at all, they now take on, I believe, a responsibility to curate this content. Like I said, I just think it's extremely damaging. You think about newspapers, and newspapers don't run every letter they get. There's a decision, there's a curation, right? We decide this one is just a rambling that has nothing to do with anything. This is just full of falsehoods, right? When you choose to publish something on your platform, on your canvas, you are making an editorial decision to allow it to exist in this space. Facebook takes down threatening and abusive things all the time. It takes down personal attacks or nudity or pornography, right? It has the ability, when you have specific publishers that are constantly spreading misinformation, it has some ability to undercut those publishers from further spreading that.
So Facebook's Sheryl Sandberg was in D.C. last week, waltzing around, supposedly testifying, and basically what she had to say was, we'll do better. Of course, Facebook doesn't want any legislation or ever any overseeing by anybody, but they're going to get it. They're going to have to get it now. So she was sent for PR. And it just annoyed me to see that. They should step up and accept their responsibility, in my view. Okay. Talking about this liked button, I do want to say this. This entire concept of liked is very, very, very much a seductive one, particularly for us Americans. The whole concept, I always think of Willie Loman in the great play, Death of a Salesman, where he says to his sons, the important thing in the United States is to be liked. And is that not true? And if we can push buttons all the time and get this feedback like a rat gets from a piece of candy, pushing like buttons can become addictive. And it's important. Everything we do in our daily lives doesn't have to be liked. And we hear horror stories constantly of teenagers and much younger kids, this new generation coming, who are basically addicted to all of this. I mean, have you not seen babies sitting in infant seats with these screens propped up in front of them? So I want you to look at this.
Teenagers today are consuming more media than ever before, but just how much time do they spend on technology each day? As CBS 2's Jan Crawford reports, the answer may surprise you.
My biggest concern with my son is the screen time with the video games.
Like many American families, the LaRues are finding it almost impossible to pull the plug on technology.
Constantly connected to cell phones.
12-year-old daughter Sasha keeps busy texting her friends. 15-year-old son Ethan is a big-time gamer.
There's this enormous experiment we're carrying out as a society, largely on our children.
Jim Steyer is founder and CEO of Common Sense Media. The new survey finds tweens spend almost 6 hours a day on entertainment media, which includes things like listening to music or watching online videos. For teenagers, that number jumps to almost 9 hours.
9 hours a day, is that a good thing?
You know, media and technology are not good or bad. It's all about how you use them.
66% of teens say they use technology to listen to music every day. 58% say they watch TV. but less than half say they use social media on a daily basis.
You would think that there'd be a much higher percentage, but the truth is they feel they have to be there because their friends are.
With kids on technology for both homework and fun, moderating their usage can be tricky.
And they are using their computers and phones and stuff for emailing teachers and doing research. You can't tell your kid you can only have 2 hours of screen time.
And the report shows 57% of tweens, kids ages 8 to 12, have their own tablets. Experts say parents can help manage their kids' technology use by monitoring their own and setting a good example.
And I want you to see and hear this.
The degree to which there is deep dissatisfaction with a democratic system across the board, but especially among younger people, should have us very worried. So I've been looking at a couple of different polls. The main one I drew from is called the World Value Survey. It's basically the same set of questions asked every 5 or 6 years in over 100 countries. And they have this battery of questions around how people feel about their democracy, whether they actually are still in favor of democracy, that people hadn't really looked at. One of the assumptions was that people really care for democracy, that they would say it's important for them to live in a democracy, that they would reject authoritarian alternatives to democracy. And in some of my recent work, I show that that's actually not the case. Over 2/3 of people born in the 1930s and 1940s say that it's essential to them to live in a democracy. Less than 1/3 of millennials do. 20 years ago, 6% of young affluent Americans said that they were open to army rule. Now it's 35%. It's increased by nearly 6-fold. And finally, when you look at our politics, it's clear that we've elected a president who has threatened to jail his political opponent, who said that he would leave Americans in suspense about whether he'd accept the outcome of the election. Yeah, I think there's a couple of reasons why young people are more skeptical about democracy. For most Americans, a lot of the reason why they supported liberal democracy has always been that it delivered for them, that it made them wealthier, that they could say, you know what, I'm a lot wealthier than my parents. For young people, that's no longer true. If you are 30 years old, you only have a 1 in 2 chance of making more money than your parents did at the same age. And so it's much easier for them to focus on the things that are bad in our system without understanding how much worse things could be. I hope that some of the young people who in my surveys said, we don't care so much about democracy, it's not that important to us, have woken up to just how crucial these issues are over the last month. So I don't think Americans are going to go down without a big fight.
So we started this discussion with just one person, one 23-year-old saying, I'm out. This is addictive. I'm not doing this anymore. And we've viewed a lot of sides of this. And I'm playing the role of Paula Revere. I picture myself riding around saying, attention must be paid, Willy Loman again. But this is a really, really serious subject we have to think about. I want to leave you with a video of Sam Harris, a TED Talk that he's given. When I say the name Sam Harris, you may think, oh, atheist. Yes, but he's also a philosopher, a public intellectual, and he's very alarmed at the subject that we're talking about. And I am hoping that you will hear this, of course, and then think about it.
I'm going to talk about a failure of intuition that many of us suffer from. It's really a failure to detect a certain kind of danger. I'm going to describe a scenario that I think is both terrifying and likely to occur. And that's not a good combination, as it turns out. And yet, rather than be scared, most of you will feel that what I'm talking about is kind of cool. I'm going to describe how the gains we make in artificial intelligence could ultimately destroy us. And in fact, I think it's very difficult to see how they won't destroy us or inspire us to destroy ourselves. And yet, if you're anything like me, you'll find that it's fun to think about these things. And that response is part of the problem. Okay, that response should worry you. If I were to convince you in this talk that we were likely to suffer a global famine, either because of climate change or some other catastrophe, and that your grandchildren or their grandchildren are very likely to live like this, you wouldn't think, interesting, I like this TED Talk. Okay. Famine isn't fun. Death by science fiction, on the other hand, is fun. And one of the things that worries me most about the development of AI at this point is that we seem unable to marshal an appropriate emotional response to the dangers that lie ahead. I'm unable to marshal this response, and I'm giving this talk. It's as though we stand before two doors. Behind door number one, we stop making progress in building intelligent machines. Our computer hardware and software just stops getting better for some reason. Now take a moment to consider why this might happen. I mean, given how valuable intelligence and automation are, we will continue to improve our technology if we are at all able to. What could stop us from doing this? A full-scale nuclear war? A global pandemic? An asteroid impact? Justin Bieber becoming president of the United States? The point is, something would have to destroy civilization as we know it. Okay, you have to imagine how bad it would have to be to prevent us from making improvements in our technology permanently, generation after generation. Almost by definition, this is the worst thing that's ever happened in human history. So the only alternative, and this is what lies behind door number two, is that we continue to improve our intelligent machines year after year after year. And at a certain point, we will build machines that are smarter than we are. And once we have machines that are smarter than we are, they will begin to improve themselves. And then we risk what the mathematician I.J. Good called an intelligence explosion, that the process could get away from us. Now, this is often caricatured, as I have here, as a fear that armies of malicious robots will attack us. But that isn't the most likely scenario. It's not that our machines will become spontaneously malevolent. The concern is really that we will build machines that are so much more competent than we are that the slightest divergence between their goals and our own could destroy us. Just think about how we relate to ants. Okay, we don't hate them. We don't go out of our way to harm them. In fact, sometimes we take pains not to harm them. We step over them on the sidewalk. But whenever their presence seriously conflicts with one of our goals, let's say when constructing a building like this one, we annihilate them without a qualm. The concern is that we will one day build machines that, whether they're conscious or not, could treat us with similar disregard. Now, I suspect this seems far-fetched to many of you. I bet there are those of you who doubt that superintelligent AI is possible, much less inevitable. Right, but then you must find something wrong with one of the following assumptions, and there are only three of them. Okay. Intelligence is a matter of information processing in physical systems. Okay, actually, this is a little bit more than an assumption, but we have already built narrow intelligence into our machines, and many of these machines perform at a level of superhuman intelligence already. And we know that mere matter can give rise to what is called general intelligence, an ability to think flexibly across multiple domains, because our brains have managed it, right? I mean, there's just atoms in here. And as long as we continue to build systems of atoms that display more and more intelligent behavior, we will eventually, unless we are interrupted, we will eventually build general intelligence into our machines. It's crucial to realize that the rate of progress doesn't matter. Any progress is enough to get us into the end zone. We don't need Moore's law to continue. We don't need exponential progress. We just need to keep going. The second assumption is that we will keep going. We will continue to improve our intelligent machines. And given the value of intelligence, intelligence is either the source of everything we value, or we need it to safeguard everything we value. It is our most valuable resource. So we want to do this. I mean, we have problems that we desperately need to solve. We want to cure diseases like Alzheimer's and cancer. We want to understand economic systems. We want to improve our climate science. So we will do this if we can. The train is already out of the station, and there's no brake to pull. Finally, we don't stand on a peak of intelligence, or anywhere near it, likely. And this really is the crucial insight. This is what makes our situation so precarious. And this is what makes our intuitions about risk so unreliable. Now just consider the smartest person who's ever lived. On almost everyone's short list here is John von Neumann. I mean, the impression that von Neumann made on the people around him, and this included the greatest mathematicians and physicists of his time, is fairly well documented. I mean, if only half the stories about him are half true, there's no question he's one of the smartest people who's ever lived. So consider the spectrum of intelligence. Okay, we have John von Neumann, and then we have you and me, and then we have a chicken. Sorry, a chicken. There's no reason for me to make this talk more depressing than it needs to be. It seems overwhelmingly likely, however, that the spectrum of intelligence extends much further than we currently conceive. And if we build machines that are more intelligent than we are, they will very likely explore this spectrum in ways that we can't imagine and exceed us in ways that we can't imagine. And it's important to recognize that this is true by virtue of speed alone, right? So imagine we just built a superintelligent AI, right, that was no smarter than your average team of researchers at Stanford or at MIT. Well, electronic circuits function about 1 million times faster than biochemical ones. Okay, so this machine should think about 1 million times faster than the minds that built it. So you set it running for a week, and it will perform 20,000 years of human-level intellectual work, week after week after week. How could we even understand, much less constrain, a mind making this sort of progress? The other thing that's worrying, frankly, is that imagine the best-case scenario. So imagine we hit upon a design of superintelligent AI that has no safety concerns. We have the perfect design the first time around. It's as though we've been handed an oracle that behaves exactly as intended. Well, this machine would be the perfect labor-saving device. It can design the machine, that can build the machine, that can do any physical work, powered by sunlight, more or less for the cost of raw materials. Okay, so we're talking about the end of human drudgery. We're also talking about the end of most intellectual work. So what would apes like ourselves do in this circumstance? Well, we'd be free to play frisbee and give each other massages. You know, add some LSD and some questionable wardrobe choices, and the whole world could be like Burning Man. Yeah. Now, that might sound pretty good, but ask yourself, what would happen under our current economic and political order? Okay, it seems likely that we would witness a level of wealth inequality and unemployment that we have never seen before, absent a willingness to immediately put this new wealth to the service of all humanity. Okay, well, a few trillionaires could grace the covers of our business magazines, while the rest of the world would be free to starve. And what would the Russians or the Chinese do if they heard that some company in Silicon Valley was about to deploy a superintelligent AI? This machine would be capable of waging war, right, whether terrestrial or cyber, with unprecedented power. Now, this is a winner-take-all scenario. To be 6 months ahead of the competition here is to be 500,000 years ahead at a minimum. Okay, so it seems that even mere rumors of this kind of breakthrough could cause our species to go berserk. Now, one of the most frightening things, in my view, at this moment, are the kinds of things that AI researchers say when they want to be reassuring. Okay, and the most common reason we're told not to worry is time. This is all a long way off, don't you know? This is probably 50 or 100 years away. One researcher has said, worrying about AI safety is like worrying about overpopulation on Mars. Okay, this is the Silicon Valley version of don't worry your pretty little head about it. Okay, no one seems to notice that referencing the time horizon is a total non sequitur. Okay, if intelligence is just a matter of information processing, and we continue to improve our machines, we will produce some form of superintelligence. And we have no idea how long it will take us to create the conditions to do that safely. Let me say that again. We have no idea how long it will take us to create the conditions to do that safely. And if you haven't noticed, 50 years is not what it used to be. And this is 50 years in months. This is how long we've had the iPhone. This is how long The Simpsons has been on television. 50 years is not that much time to meet one of the greatest challenges our species will ever face. And once again, we seem to be failing to have an appropriate emotional response to what we have every reason to believe is coming. The computer scientist Stuart Russell has a nice analogy here. He said, imagine that we received a message from an alien civilization, which read, "People of Earth, we will arrive on your planet in 50 years. Get ready." And now we're just counting down the months until the mothership lands. Okay. We would feel a little more urgency than we do. Another reason we're told not to worry is that these machines can't help but share our values because they will be literally extensions of ourselves. They'll be grafted onto our brains and will essentially become their limbic systems. Now, take a moment to consider that the safest and only prudent path forward recommended is to implant this technology directly into our brains. Now, this may in fact be the safest and only prudent path forward, but usually one's safety concerns about a technology have to be pretty much worked out before you stick it inside your head. Okay. The deeper problem is that building superintelligent AI on its own seems likely to be easier than building superintelligent AI and having a completed neuroscience that allows us to seamlessly integrate our minds with it. And given that the companies and governments doing this work are likely to perceive themselves to be in a race against all others, given that to win this race is to win the world, provided you don't destroy it in the next moment, then it seems likely that whatever is easier to do will get done first. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a solution to this problem, apart from recommending that more of us think about it. I think we need something like a Manhattan Project on the topic of artificial intelligence. Not to build it, because I think we'll inevitably do that, but to understand how to avoid an arms race and to build it in a way that is aligned with our interests. When you're talking about superintelligent AI that can make changes to itself, it seems that we only have one chance to get the initial conditions right. And even then, we will need to absorb the economic and political consequences of getting them right. But the moment we admit that information processing is the source of intelligence, that some appropriate computational system is what the basis of intelligence is, and we admit that we will improve these systems continuously, and we admit that the horizon of cognition very likely far exceeds what we currently know, then we have to admit that we're in the process of building some sort of God. Now would be a good time to make sure it's a God we can live with. Thank you very much.
Don't be discouraged. You may be laughing at that, but I'm going to point out to you, we're here. We're talking about it. You're listening. We're reading. So there's reason not to be discouraged. Thanks so much for joining me. Please join in the discussion. You can go to email. You can go down below this to like. Oh, you could press the like button. See you in 2 weeks.